Hello and welcome back to the worst Warmachine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian and this is Malorian Weekly. Now, this entire month, we're going to be dedicating it to the different win conditions of Warmachine. So those are Assassination, Attrition, Scenario, and Death Clock. And each one of these will then be taking one of those and teaching you how to master it. Now, for this first one here, we're going to be talking about Assassination. And I always find Assassination so interesting because it's kind of like one of those things like Schrodinger's Warcaster, where a Warcaster at the same time will exist as being impossible to kill and so easy to kill, just depending whether you're seeing it as your own caster or your opponent's. But we're going to be getting into that. The main thing here is we're going to make sure we're going to go through 10 points, 10 big things for you to focus on, that if you do this, you're going to be a master at Assassination. Bring this part of your game up, and then as soon as you're a master at all four, oh boy, you got like that infinity gauntlet of 4 whatever. Okay, the metaphor is falling apart. You know what I mean. Once you can do all these things, you're just going to be winning even more. So before we even get into this, before we even start talking about what number 1 is, well, let's talk about why Assassination is good. What are the big pros? If I'm trying to sell you on this win condition, what are the reasons you want to be going for this? And I think one of the things that's really the number 1 is the fact that you just have to kill one model. That's it. You know, in all these other games that people are doing where you have to wipe out all these things and capture this and do this. No, you don't need to do all that complex stuff. Kill one model and you win the entire game. That is not only a great thing for the simplicity of what it means for your mental state, but also the fact that, hey, I just do this and I win the game. Goodbye, see you later. I'm going to write this W on my sheet, take the win, move on to the next game. And so whether that is that, where you want to get that fast win, make sure that whatever your opponents are having planned, maybe they're not going to pull the rug out from underneath you, maybe bad dice ruins it for you. No, I'm going to go for this assassination, I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to take this win. And then hell, if it's in like a tournament or something like that, if you can win a game around quickly, what that means is that you can go and actually get a chance to rest, actually get a chance to like eat in between rounds. And that's huge. Or if it's even casual, what it really means is, hey, that game only took us 30 minutes. Want to do another? Sure, yeah. So it can always be nice to have those fast games for whatever the reason is. What are the bad things though? What are the cons? What would be the things like, ooh, I don't know if assassination's the right thing to do? Well, there's a lot of risk when it comes to assassination. Sure, if it works, boom, you killed one model, you win the game. But if you fail, that means that you invested all these resources to kill this one model and it didn't happen. And so really what you did on your turn is you moved your models forward, you used up some clock, and then you passed it over. And then that's where, you know, if we're talking about attrition, which we'll be talking about a different week, oh boy, you did like nothing. They're going to come back and do lots of damage to you. And whether they win or send you down the way to you're going to be losing anyway, yeah, that's not a good thing to have happen. So there's a real risk there for going for assassination. All right, so with all that there, let's get into those 10 different points that I want to focus on. And the very first one is going to be know your method. And what I mean by this is that you can't just waltz into a game grabbing some random models and being like, I'm going to go for assassination. I mean, you can, but you're not going to be very successful at it. This is something where you have to have a very designated way that you're going to be trying to execute this plan. This is not something that you really decide on at the start of a match. This is something that you build right into your list. You're going to very specifically think, am I going to try and assassinate by melee, by range, by magic? And then I'm going to make sure that I'm picking the right caster, the right battle group, the right units and solos, the right theme to really make sure I have the best chance at assassinating whatever I'm going to be up against. And so whether that's making sure that this list is having a whole bunch of guns that are very well supported by this caster with this spell and this feat and this solo, or maybe, okay, this is a caster that can really send this jack forward and I'm going to use all these different pieces to buff it up and send it out there and hit as hard as possible. Whatever it is, I have to design that and have it ready in my list before I even get there to that game. So if you're not a person that's really willing to do that, if you're not a person that can say, you know what, I want to be building an assassination list, you just won't be successful. So very first thing, step number one, you have to know your method and you have to be able to bring it to paper. And I mean, we could go more into depth about what's the best ways you could be building these things, but really it gets very specific and unique depending on what faction you're in and what way you're going with it. So we're not going to jump into that right now. We are going to jump into number 2, though, which is know your math. Now, this is unfortunate, out of all the 4 things that you can be trying to win this game by, this is the one that you have to do the most math in. I mean, again, most like anything else I'm going to be saying, you could not, but you're just going to get yourself into trouble and you're just not going to be a very good assassination player. Now, what I mean by math is that if you've ever heard about somebody covering their game and saying, this was an 85% assassination, this was a 30% assassination, what that's really meaning is that in this situation where these models are where they are, the terrain is where they are, if I'm able to bring to bear each one of my available resources onto your caster, what are the odds I'd actually kill them? So the math involved is going to be, if I have this many shots, this is my ability to hit, this is your defense, well, then I'm going to be hitting on average this number of times. If my POW is this and your armor is this, on average, each one that hits is going to be doing this amount of damage. And then when I add this all up, this is how much damage I'll do on average. And then how many boxes do you have? Okay. And then based on that, I can say that given some variance on everything that's going to be happening, what are the odds that I'll be doing at least as much damage as you have boxes? And obviously this gets very complicated when all of a sudden it's not like, oh, I have 10 shots that are exactly the same. Okay, I got a few of these shots and one of these, and for this I could either boost a hit or boost a damage, and then you're probably going to shield guard something, so how am I going to be dealing with that? This is very, very math intensive, and whether you're a person that has like an app for it and you're going to plug it in, or maybe you're good for it just quickly on the fly doing it in your head, you have to be able to do that math. Not only because then in the game, you'll know if this is the right time to spring your trap. Should I do it this turn? Should I do it next turn? What are my odds going each time as I'm going through this? But also, if you think of that and have that math in your mind, it's going to help you with the first one to actually make your list, know your method, and build it in right there. Right away, you're saying, all right, if I got everything going in this list, I could be doing on average this much damage, which kills this many type of casters out there, right? If you know the math, that's going to lead you into the method. And again, if you have the math here, well, that's going to be telling you the right time to be going ahead. And I mean, something to be keeping in mind here, even though there might be an 85% chance of you assassinating the caster, and that's good, this is a very good time to really pointing out that negative I said, where there's also a 15% chance it won't be successful. So knowing this math and knowing the odds and whether what you could be doing to safeguarding them is going to be extremely important. So if you're a person that doesn't like doing the math, this might not be the right way for you. All right, number 3, know your enemy. More knowledge stuff, hooray! And the reason why this is so important is because in order to do the math, you have to know what you're up against. If you don't understand that, oh, this model has this defense and this armor, I mean, that's just the basic stuff. Then maybe it has extra things like prowl, where it'll have stealth if it's here. Oh, it's going to be able to have this ability that's going to be protected. Oh, there's this shield guard here. If you don't know everything that they have over there, something like countercharge, you're going to go up and be like, all right, this is going to come here to take a shot. Oh, I got countercharged. Oh no. And everything falls apart. So in order to do your math calculation, and also just more basically to actually just roll out and execute your plan, you have to know your enemy. So again, this is something where you need to be a little bit more of a scholar, not just somebody that's good at the math, but someone who is willing to learn the rules and be like, I got to go through all your cards because I got to know everything that you can actually do. So I know all their interactions. So I actually have some accurate numbers going into my math. So again, if this is not sounding like your cup of tea, maybe this is not your win condition you should be looking for. All right, next one I'm calling know your keys. Now, when we're talking about know your enemy, we're talking about things like knowing what if they have stealth, what if they have shield guards, what if they have this. And you have to have plans for these things. Just very simply, what happens if they stand models in front of their caster? What do you do? Do you have other shots that aren't as important that you can shoot those things down? Do you have something you can use to knock that down so that you can see past it? What if they're stealth? Do you have something in there that can actually see through stealth? How many pieces in your list can see through stealth? Because that changes the math. What if they actually have the ability to go like incorporeal and you need magical attacks, right? What if it's something where they can go and put up clouds? How can you deal with that? So knowing what are the possibilities out there will now know, again, coming back to the method, what are the keys you have to be putting into your list? And even though sometimes it might seem like, you know what, I'm going to try and win by guns. So I'm going to take all the guns and here we go. You can make a list full of guns, but if you ever run up against a lock that you don't have the key for, you're just going to lose. You know, if you take all these non-magical guns and you go against Menoth and Choir, and now they can't shoot, well, who cares? You couldn't actually do anything. You can't actually answer them. So you now have to be thinking about the main strategies that your opponents would be using against you and whatever your method is, and then having the keys to counter it. It's basically knowing the counters against your strategy and then having counters for those counters. And that might sound convoluted, but it's very important. And if you don't build them in, it's just a ticking time bomb that eventually you're going to be running into that thing that you can't deal with, and then you just lose that game. All right, next one we're going to be talking about is know your terrain. Now, the reason why you need to know your terrain is because terrain's going to be playing a massive factor when it comes to assassinations. Whether we're talking about something simple like a wall where they can go behind it and maybe now their defense is higher if you're trying to shoot at them or hit them with spells. Maybe it's just the fact that they're behind a wall and now this jack you're going to be sending against them doesn't have Pathfinder and now can't get over the wall, or it doesn't have reach and can't be getting there. Maybe it's not a wall, maybe it's just a full-on building and it's hiding behind. How are you going to be dealing with that terrain? What if it's a forest doing the same type of thing? All these things and knowing what the terrain is and how it interacts with your method is critically important. And again, that's something where you have to be keeping it in mind when you're building your list and when you're figuring out what keys you need, but then also when you get onto the board. You might want to actually make sure that you go second because you realize if they take that side and they put their caster there, I just can't kill them. I do not have the key for this, so I need to go second so I can pick that side and put them on whatever side doesn't have the right to terrain to protect them, if you follow what I'm saying. So with that, you have to kind of know how these things interact, know how to use them, and at the same time, maybe you could be trying to find ways to be using that terrain to your advantage, right? Maybe saying things like, oh, if I use this part of the terrain here where there's walls and stuff like that they don't want to deal with, they're going to kind of compact together, and maybe I can kind of try and trap this. I can try and get around things that way. I know the caster wants to be here because this is where the most cover is. Okay, if I know the caster is going to be going there, I need to make sure that every range piece I had or every long range, melee assassinating piece I was going to have is going to have eyes on that area so that if they go there, it's not like, well, I'm in a bunker, I'm home free. Okay, you're in your bunker, but I have every gun facing you and I'm going to take you out now. So that's a very important thing to realize, the interaction, the understanding of what side is imperative given your assassination technique, and also foreseeing what's on the table and where your opponent's going to go so you can actually get to that caster and get to the kill properly. All right, the next thing you need to know is sustainability. And what I mean by that is that if I go for this assassination and it does not work, what happens next? Do I just lose? Is this something where it's like Sloan and a bunch of hunters, where I can go in from super far away, pew, 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 pew? Oh, did it not work? All right, well, you probably can't even get to me, so I'll have a second turn. Or is it something where like everything was based on this one jack getting to you, and if it failed, you'll kill that jack and now it's over? Or maybe I have these short range guns and now they're going to be dead and or engaged and it's not going to work anymore. So knowing what that sustainability is going to really lead to that math part. If you know that you do not have a lot of sustainability in this list, well, that means that you have to wait for that perfect opportunity where those odds are as high as possible, and then that's the time you want to go for it. You don't want to go for it early when those odds are low. You got to wait until like, all right, I got this one shot. Or maybe you have a mixture. Maybe you have a mixture of some pieces where, okay, this is very long range, and I can use this asset and not risk it. You know, maybe it's a long range gun. Maybe it's you have multiple arc nodes. So you could be doing like sending out one first. And then if I chip away at my opponent, I'm not going to kill them this turn, but I'm going to reduce their boxes. And the more boxes that I reduce, the easier you're going to be killing in the future. So even though I could go and like push in everything now and have, let's just throw out like a 55% chance of assassination. That's kind of really touch and go. Or I can use my pieces right now that can go long range, not lose anything, stay sustainable in my threat. And now next turn that you've lost a few boxes, let's say that jumps up to 85%. Okay, that's fantastic. Again, we're just pulling numbers out of our ass at this point, but you get what I'm trying to say here. And knowing your sustainability and knowing the math is then really going to determine what you're going to be doing and whether this is your go turn or whether you need to be setting up for later. Now, when we talk about setting up for later, this is where we go on to our next point, which will be know how to delay. And that can be used in a lot of different ways. One, if it's going to be something where I'm going to be going in there and going for this and then realizing, okay, I'm going to need a second turn to finish this, I need something so I can delay and tie things up so that my important pieces stay free to do what they need to on the next turn. So whether I have a throwaway unit or whatever it is, I have to have some way to bog things down to protect my key pieces so that they can actually do what they need to in the following turn. The other thing to keep in mind here is scenario. If I am going to hold back and wait for that perfect time, they might just go ahead and just win on scenario. And you're just sitting there going like, oh, all right, I guess you win. So you need to have these pieces built in there knowing that usually an assassination army wants to stay back and wait for the right time to strike. But to do that, you need to delay both the scenario and their army. So that, again, if you need to go in there and set up or be like, okay, I went for that first turn where I'm chipping away, but next turn I need to finish them off. Well, there has to be either the pieces or the knowledge and the positioning so that you're setting up and delaying them so you can actually do that next turn. So that's very important. You have to be thinking at least a couple turns ahead, and that's not always the easiest thing to do without practice. So if that's not something you're used to thinking of, if you normally just think of what's going to happen this turn, you need to start thinking about what's going to happen this turn and next turn after that. How am I going to be digging my way and lasting so I can get to my objective, which is killing that caster? All right, next one. Knowing how to force. And what I mean by that is that if your opponent knows that you're going to be going for assassination, they're going to be protecting their caster. So by knowing how to force, you're knowing what are the right ways that I can be making my opponent use their caster in the way that's going to be allowing me to actually get to it. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could be going about this. Maybe it's all about going first and going really fast. So I'm going to take first turn, I'm going to rush up the board. And so even though normally my opponent could be staying out of range, well, there's something called kill box. And if my opponent does not move forward, well, I'm going to start just having to shift over to scenario. So I'm forcing my opponent to put their caster in danger by taking control of the board. Maybe it's something where I need to mix in some attrition. If I go, and if I'm really good at killing like one model, I can probably start sniping out some regular models. And if I'm doing that, at some point, they're going to have to be bringing their caster forward. This kind of like muddies the water between what attrition is and what assassination is, but maybe my end goal is assassination, but I need to be having enough attrition in there that I'm going to be forcing you forward and saying like, all right, if you don't now use this caster, I'm just going to win. I'm just going to keep on trying to pick away at you till there's nothing left. So you either like, put up or shut up type thing. So knowing how to force your opponent and putting them into a position where their caster has to be in risk even when they don't want it to be is very important to assassination. And that ties in exactly also with the next one is know how to tempt. Now, what I mean by know how to tempt is that if your opponent knew that the only way you were going to win by assassination, their caster would be in the back corner, it'd be fully camped all the time, they wouldn't even give you a shot. Well, luckily we have some things that we just talked about, like using things like the kill box to force them forward, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes you need to tempt them. Maybe you put up a piece that, oh no, you can get to it. And now that caster is in a lot more of a dangerous situation. Like, oh geez, I didn't go and contest that flag. Now you can go and can claim it with your caster. They take the bait, they go right there, guns train on, you take it out. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's more like, okay, that flag's not available, but instead, this jack is here, and you could go and kill it. It's gonna, take you to allocate some fury and some focus, but you could do it. And by tempting them to do that, they are now spending those resources so that they're not camping as much. And if maybe you're down a heavy, but now they're camping 1 rather than 3, that could be exactly what you need in order to bring those numbers up and actually pull off that assassination. Now, this can get very dangerous, and it's one of those things where like you have to kind of be second guessing what your opponent's guessing. If you're giving up pieces and they just take them without using the caster, you are now just in a worse spot. So that's not going to be helping you whatsoever. But the better that you know how your opponent works, the better way to be forcing them to do things, tempting them to do things. I mean, really, if you think about it, if you and your opponent had all the full knowledge, there's going to be a point where like, look, these are the opportunities. You can get a tread ahead on attrition, but the odds of your assassination will be going up. So what are you going to do? You're either going to offer me a better spot for assassination, or you're going to be offering me a better part for attrition. What are you going to give me? It's going to be one or the other. So again, that's going to more come in when you master all the different parts of the win condition, but that falls in here. All right, the very last thing I want to cover for assassination is know when you don't have a better choice. A lot of what I've been talking about is setting up with a method, looking for the right numbers, setting things up, waiting, trying to tempt them out, trying to force them, trying to like pick a way to get the right time. And sometimes the right time's never going to come up. Sometimes you're going to look at this and there's going to be a 3% assassination, and that is going to be your best chance. Just because you don't have the odds or saying like, usually I'm going to win this game. If your way of winning the game is assassination, it could be that next turn it's going to be 0. It could be that next turn they're going to be getting the attrition, the board control that they need. Their caster can get far away. And so even though you don't have a really good shot, that might be your only one. So this is, again, knowing the math and knowing the difference that 3% is more than 0, but it's also having that ability to say, you know what, this is my best shot. You don't want to be the person that says, oh, well, I waited for the perfect moment and then I just lost the game because it never came. You have to take those shots when they come up, because in the end, it's better to have that 3% than no chance at all. And I think that's even though this sounds like obvious, like 3% is better than 0, this is a real difference you see between people that are more side like myself, where normally I'm like the scenario. I want to play it safe. I just want to do whatever I can to ease my way and slowly work myself to victory. But assassination doesn't work like that. Assassination is abrupt. Assassination is aggressive. And if you have to take the shot, you have to take the shot. So let's go over quickly all the things we talked about in order to master assassination. You have to know your method. You have to start off with a list that is designed for assassination. You have to know exactly what your path to assassination is going to be and specifically build it with all the pieces in order to make sure you can achieve that. And the reason that you're going to do that is you're going to know the math. You're going to know how the math works for it to hitting, to doing damage, and you're going to know how much you need to do to on average kill your opponent. With that, you have to know your enemy. You have to know them well enough that you know the math and you know what to bring to bear to not only know what it takes to kill them, but what to avoid for your whole assassination attempt to be going off the rails. You also have to know what your keys are. This is something that has to be built in right from the beginning. So if you see stealth or incorporeal or clouds or whatever it is, you have a way of unlocking that and getting to the assassination victory that you were wanting. You also have to know the terrain. You have to know how the terrain is going to be affecting your assassination. Know the terrain you have to keep away from your opponent. And if you can't, knowing where your opponent's going to go so you can be forcing all your pieces at that location so you can be having the best chances once they go there. You have to know your sustainability so that turn to turn, you know when's the right time to actually say push the red button and it's going to be go, go, go. Maybe right now we got an 80% chance. That's the time to take it. Maybe right now if you went for it, it's 35, but it'll be 65 next turn. Again, knowing the math, knowing your sustainability, knowing what pieces you can sacrifice for a better odds next turn. Next thing you need to know in order to do that is you know how to delay, and you know how to force, and you know how to tempt. You know how to delay them so you can kind of wait for that right time. You know how to force so that while you're delaying, you're going to be forcing them into a bad position. And you know how to tempt so that it's not so much you're forcing them into a bad situation. You're saying, look, you have this opportunity, but there's going to be this additional risk, which might align exactly with what you're trying to do. And then finally, after all this is done, like we said, you have to know when this is just your best option. And even though you just have the 3% chance, this is the time to go for it. So there you go. At the end of the day, assassination can be wonderful. You can go out there and you can just kill that one model and you can win the whole game. But on the other sides, if you don't use it properly, if you get too risky, if you don't follow each one of these 10 things, it can fall apart and you can find that you wasted your turn and really just put yourself in a bad position. And really then after that, the game's kind of over as they either ate you up, went for scenario, whatever it was. So there you go. That's mastering assassination. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other tips out there. If you want to go ahead and put them down below, we can chat about it in the comments. But otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.